My wife flirted with a guy at work, but later told me honestly about it. My desire to get a divorce has not disappeared. For context, I, 33M, and my wife, Kate, 32F, have been married for 8 years. We have one child, a 3-year-old son, who was unplanned but welcomed. When Kate discovered she was pregnant, it came as a surprise since she had been on birth control ever since we started dating. We had agreed that we weren't financially ready for a child. However, after 5 years of marriage and progress in our careers, we felt we could manage. Thus, we decided to keep the baby and began planning for the next phase of our lives. Before Kate got pregnant, she worked as a waitress at a local restaurant, earning just above minimum wage with tips included. I, on the other hand, am a construction worker and earned 2 to 3 times more than she did at the time. We lived in a decent apartment, but agreed that we needed a real house to have enough space for our child. We started looking for our first home. As Kate's pregnancy progressed, she quit her job to focus on preparing for the baby. We found a house we liked, although it was more expensive than I had hoped for. While I make good money in construction, supporting 2 people, a new mortgage, and buying all the baby supplies is not easy. I began working more hours to afford everything, which meant spending less time at home with Kate. When our baby finally arrived, he was a healthy little boy, and I couldn't have been prouder. However, once he was born, Kate began to change. She became more tired and stressed from caring for a newborn, which I completely understand. I know kids are a lot of work. I essentially raised my little brother, who is 10 years younger than me. However, Kate also complained that I wasn't around much, and that when I was home, I didn't help with the baby as much as she thought I should. I explained that to afford the house, the baby, and support us both on my own, I had to put in extra hours at work. When I come home each day, I'm exhausted from lifting heavy materials all day long. I'm lucky if my back isn't terribly sore. Still, I tried to help more where I could, changing diapers, feeding the baby, etc. The one thing I refused to do was get up in the middle of the night. I know this upsets her, but my reasoning is that I'm barely getting 5 hours of sleep a night as it is. If I get any less, I'll be a wreck on the job. If that happens and I get fewer hours or even get fired, we're financially screwed. As time went on, we managed to make it work. Eventually, things became less crazy and stressful. As our son got older, he required less constant attention and care from us. Caring for a toddler isn't easy, but it's easier than caring for an infant who can't sleep through the night. 2 months ago, Kate suggested that she go back to work and that we use the extra income to pay for a nanny and help with expenses in general. I agreed because I was exhausted and the idea of putting in fewer overtime hours sounded great. Fast forward to last night, and Kate has been working as a cashier for 6 weeks now. We've hired a nanny and our financial situation isn't nearly as tight. I was able to reduce my work hours, though with Kate working now, I don't get to see her in the mornings, which used to be our time together due to my shift schedule. I thought things were going great until Kate sat me down last night for a conversation. She admitted that there's a guy at her work who's been flirting with her, despite knowing she's married. She described him as funny, easygoing, and handsome. She said that he asked if she was available to go on a date behind my back, and although she said no, she was sorely tempted to say yes. This blindsided me at the moment, but after having a day to think about it, I think I can see how this happened. Kate has always been upset that I wasn't home very often and wasn't there to help and support her with our child. Our current arrangement allowed me to have more energy when I came home, but since she leaves for work in the morning before I wake up, the actual duration of time I see her each day has shrunk even further. I think that the reason she was tempted by this guy at work is that he's giving her the attention she wants from me. I can understand that, but it also pissed me off. Frankly, I've been busting my ass for 3 years to afford our child, the house she wanted, and her ability to be a stay-at-home mom. I've been working 10 or 12-hour days 6 days a week to afford this, and she's tempted by some guy at work after knowing him for just 6 weeks. I felt more betrayed than I ever have before. I asked to see her phone, and she gave it to me without resistance. I went through all her contacts, deleted messages, everything, and didn't find anything suspicious. I don't believe that she actually cheated and is only pretending to be tempted to, but I suppose it's possible. She seemed genuinely remorseful during our conversation, but that didn't make it feel any better. In the heat of the moment, I told her that I wanted a divorce. This caused her to break down in tears and beg me to stay. She asked if I would tear our family apart over just the idea of her cheating, and I threw her words back in her face and said I was sorely tempted. I then went to bed and ignored her attempts to get me to talk since I had work today, the work that has kept our family afloat for the last 3 years, and more if you count the 5 years I spent making 3 times more than she did. I thought about this all day today, and I'm not sure what to do. I can't get over the idea of my wife wanting to cheat with the first man she spent any extended time with in 3 years. She asked me if I was going to throw it all away over a feeling, but she was going to do the same damn thing with the guy from work. She's angry that I got angry at her in the moment, but I think I have good reason to be furious. Edit. After reading through many of the comments here, I've decided that I'm going to have a thorough conversation with my wife before taking any drastic action like divorce. I feel, or maybe I just hope, that there's still a chance for us to be happy and healthy together, despite everything that's happened. For starters, I'm going to tell her how I truly feel about all this, not just what I was thinking in the heat of the moment when she told me about what happened with the guy from work. It deeply hurts to know that my wife was sorely tempted by some stranger she met 6 weeks ago after being married for 8 years and having a son together. I've been busting my ass, both literally and figuratively, to be able to afford everything, and I feel like she hasn't been appreciating that. I understand that she's been busy at home taking care of our child, but if we were to trade jobs for a day, I highly suspect she would change her tune regarding the division of work and effort that we've been putting in. Additionally, I plan to tell her that I want her to quit her job immediately. Even if she wasn't tempted at all, I don't want her around the type of scumbag man who would try to take advantage of a married woman. If she doesn't agree to this, then I will have to assume that there's more between her and the guy at work than she's letting on. Lastly, I want to discuss what needs to be done in our relationship to mend it at this point. As many commenters have pointed out, she's almost certainly feeling lonely and neglected with how little time we get to spend together, but I'm not sure how we can improve that while maintaining our current lifestyle. If I'm going to be supporting our family on my own, then I simply won't have time to spend with her during the week. A few commenters suggested she get a job with hours that align with mine so that we're home at the same time, and honestly, that sounds like it could be a partial solution to this. Even if it's just a few hours a day where we can both be home, and I'm not falling overtired, it would be better than what we have now. And as she slowly gets raises and promotions, I'll be able to work less and devote more time to her and our son. I'll probably update this post tomorrow once we have that conversation, but for now, I need to get to sleep. Update 1 day later. Many people have been asking how my wife getting a job was able to pay for a nanny and me reducing my work hours slightly. The answer is that we live in the northeastern USA, where minimum wages are relatively good. Additionally, the term nanny was a poor choice of words on my part. She's more of an informal babysitter rather than someone with an official job title. She's a college student who wanted to make some money while taking online classes without dealing with the hassle of getting a real job. My wife makes around $16 per hour with a standard 40-hour work week, while we pay the babysitter $10 per hour for 5 hours per day, 5 days a week. After taxes on my wife's income and paying for the babysitter, we have around $900 a month left over. This surplus has allowed me to reduce my hours slightly. Now for the update. I called in sick to work today, which is something I rarely ever do, and asked my wife to do the same so we could sit down and talk about everything. She agreed, and this morning we had a long, heartfelt discussion. I told her that I was sorry for what I said in the heat of the moment. I don't want to divorce her. I was angry and hurt and wasn't thinking about the damage threatening divorce would do. I told her that I understand things have been difficult for us the last 3 years, but I was shocked that she would be sorely tempted to cheat on me after just 6 weeks with some random guy at her job. I expressed that having been the sole, or at least the main provider for our family, pretty much the entire time we've known each other, I felt like I wasn't being appreciated enough for the work and effort I've been putting in. She said she felt the same way, that she felt like she was struggling thanklessly since I was never around to be with her. I told her that was only the case because I had to make enough money to pay for the kid and the house she wanted. And, before anyone tries to twist my words, I love my son dearly. I am not simply putting up with him because she wanted to keep him. If I took less overtime to see her and help with the kid more often, we'd have trouble keeping the lights on. We both agreed that we needed more time with each other at home, but talking out how to make that happen took a while. Eventually, I told her that I stand by what I said to her when we first bought the house we are currently in. It is too much house for us. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house with more area than we need, and the mortgage and property taxes are too high. I brought this up when we first looked at the house, but my wife insisted that this would be the perfect house for our family to grow up in, and that once it was paid off, we would be set. But seeing how much we've struggled to afford this house while slowly falling apart physically and mentally, I think she understands now that it's too much. After some prodding, I convinced my wife that we need to start looking for a smaller house to downsize into. Selling our current house will provide us with enough cash to pay off the mortgage, though not by much. Once we move into a smaller home with lower expenses, I won't have to work as much, which means we can spend more time together as a couple and as a family. She told me that she just wanted my name back, and hearing how much she meant it almost brought me to tears. I had been so focused on work and paying the bills that I lost sight of what we needed as a couple, and our marriage nearly imploded because of it. The final issue we needed to address was her job, specifically the scumbag who was hitting on her despite knowing she was married. Given our current financial situation, it would be imprudent to make her quit her job and go back to staying at home. Plus, it would likely make her feel trapped again since she only recently re-entered the workforce after being a stay-at-home mom. However, I can't stand the thought of that guy even looking at my wife, especially since I know she harbored some sort of interest in him at some point, even if it stemmed from loneliness and desperation. I told her that at the very least, she needs to report the guy to management or HR and request different hours so that they are never in the building at the same time. If that can be arranged, then there's no reason for her to quit. But if it doesn't happen, then I'll help her look for a new job immediately. Things are still difficult right now, but as I type this a couple of hours after our conversation, I believe we've pulled back from the point of no return. We're both taking the day to calm down and think rationally about what needs to happen to get our financial and personal relationship back on track. I'm hopeful. Thank you so much to everyone who gave advice and constructive criticism. Many of you suggested couples therapy, and while I'm considering it, that's another significant expense I don't want to take on right now unless it's absolutely necessary. If things continue to improve between my wife and me, then I won't spend the money on therapy. But if things start to stagnate or worsen again, then I'll bite the bullet and suggest getting professional help to her. Okay, friends, let's move on to another interesting story. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I really want 1,000 subscribers. Am I the jerk for distancing myself from my daughter after she ignored her mother, my wife, during a serious illness? My daughter is 19, still very young, but old enough to understand the gravity of her actions. 5 years ago, my wife, who is also her biological mother, began to exhibit very strange behavior. She would say odd things, make impulsive decisions, and act unusually. This led to frequent clashes between her and our daughter. Although my daughter has always been a daddy's girl, she was still close to her mother. Initially, I thought my wife was going through a midlife crisis, dealing with the pressures of working while raising a teenager. We had a serious discussion about it. About 6 months after this behavior started, my wife was involved in a severe accident. During the emergency surgery that followed, doctors discovered a tumor the size of a ball pressing against her brain, which explained her earlier behavior. My wife had to relearn basic skills such as walking and talking. She was mentally and physically disabled for a significant period. During this time, our daughter refused to be seen in public with her mother. She was embarrassed by the wheelchair and her mother's condition. She would often ignore her mother and speak only to me, sometimes even discussing her mother as if she wasn't there. She viewed my wife as a burden and complained about her to others, which eventually led to the school contacting me. I was struggling to manage everything at the time and couldn't afford to alienate my daughter. My wife required extensive care, and my daughter was going through a challenging stage in her life that I couldn't abandon her in. When my daughter left for college, I felt sad but also somewhat relieved. My wife still occasionally needs a wheelchair and has difficulty with some tasks. but she has made significant improvements. This experience has strengthened our love and commitment to each other and our marriage. Now my daughter is coming home for summer break after her exams. For some reason, I feel uncomfortable with her staying for an extended period. The sense of closeness I once felt with her seems to have vanished after she treated her mother so callously. I'm unsure how to handle this situation. My wife is very excited about our daughter's visit, but I fear she will be heartbroken if things go poorly. Despite trying to work through these feelings with my therapist, I still can't seem to feel emotionally close to my daughter, and I'm sure she'll notice. Am I the jerk? Edit. I don't understand where any of your assumptions about my wife are coming from. Her mother was never abusive in any way, whether mentally or emotionally. When I mentioned that my wife did or said strange things, it was because she had regressed in some ways to a childlike state, which was further exacerbated by the accident. For instance, she would go on and on about a show she watched, unable to tell a coherent story. She would spit out food if she didn't like it. My daughter was never put in an abusive situation. Update. 9 days later. Mother's Day was terrible. I don't know why I'm updating this. Maybe it's for the few people who can sympathize. A lot of the prior comments made untrue, horrible accusations about my wife. My wife was never abusive or even mean, not in any state. It makes it so much harder to understand why our daughter would be so cold to her own mother. My wife's mental state before the accident had regressed into childlike behavior, which is concerning but not the cause of my daughter's coldness. My wife would spit food back into her plate, bluntly say it tasted bad, and wipe her nose with her sleeve like a child. I made the error of thinking she was having a midlife crisis because she bought an expensive dress simply because it was soft. She would forget to do things, neglecting her responsibilities. Mother and daughter clashed because my wife would tell stories with no beginning or end, just rambling. She would ask the same questions repeatedly. She would promise to pick our daughter up or bring something and then forget. These were things that would naturally annoy a teenage girl. The tumors were concentrated in the back of her head. When she got into the car accident, it made everything worse. She needed to relearn everything and is still disabled. We had high expectations for our daughter, but she set them even higher for herself. She had a dream school she wanted to attend since she was 12. This meant I had to chauffeur her to many activities throughout high school and sacrifice a lot to ensure she got the opportunities she wanted. It also meant leaving my disabled wife in a long-term care facility to hopefully recover. Due to COVID, there were long stretches where we didn't visit her. She was there for too long. I never should have left her there. When she came home, my wife was still largely nonverbal and wheelchair-bound. She needed help with everything from eating to going to the bathroom. I earned a little as a caregiver on top of my regular job. During this time, my daughter was incredibly cruel and cold to her mother. She wasn't a young kid or even a young teen anymore. She was never expected to take care of her mother and never did, so it wasn't caregiver burnout. She would hate it if her mother came outside with her and later blamed it on the wheelchair, saying it was bulky and attracted attention. She would ignore her mother and moved away to distance herself physically. I ended up getting a call from the school because a classmate had overheard what my daughter said about her mother and reported it as ableism. I don't know what she said. All I know is that she was very cruel to her mother. I had her in individual therapy, and we did therapy as father and daughter. It was her choice to stop. My daughter ended up getting into her dream college. They had an accepted students' weekend, and she demanded that her mother stay home even though parents were invited. By that time, my wife had made significant progress and was disappointed to stay home. I went and tried to be a proud father. At least she let her mother go to graduation. My daughter came home a few days ago after finishing her exams earlier. She informed us that she had earned a research position with a professor for the summer. My wife was overjoyed and all on her own wrote a card expressing how proud she was and how she wished she could see her daughter grow into an accomplished young woman. She shared how proud she felt to be part of this moment. My daughter looked visibly sick with guilt, a look I recognized well. On Mother's Day, I made a comment that my daughter couldn't ignore her mother today. She told me to stop saying that. I then mentioned again how proud her mother was of her and how much she loved her, doing it deliberately. This led to my daughter confessing that she regretted what she had done. I always had my suspicions. I pressed her until she tearfully admitted that she hated what her mother had turned into and that she had hit her mother once. She was ashamed to be around her because of what people might think. Our conversation escalated into a shouting match, and my daughter yelled at me, accusing me of focusing on everyone else's behavior because I regretted my own actions. In many ways, she was right. Due to COVID, there were limited visiting hours, but I still didn't visit my wife as much as I should have. I left her in a facility to focus on our daughter, but also to make things easier for myself. With no siblings or grandparents to help, it was just us. I avoided visiting often because I hated seeing my wife sob when I had to leave. My guilt intensified after reading a news article about a nurse being sentenced for assaulting a woman in a coma. It made me think about my wife, nonverbal with limited short-term memory and wheelchair-bound. I wouldn't know if something happened to her. I tried convincing myself that everything was fine, but kept finding more news articles about abuse in care facilities, leading to nightmares. Eventually, I pulled my wife out of the facility, taking months off work to bring her home. While she was cared for at the facility, it wasn't the way I would have done it. She came home with a few knots in her hair, bruising, and sores. The care was brutal. Now, I had to juggle taking care of my wife and ensuring my daughter was supported in reaching her dreams. It was hard seeing my wife like that. Once accomplished and intelligent, now unable to do a puzzle, eat on her own, or go to the bathroom by herself. There was a huge learning curve, and they assigned a nurse to visit every few days. My wife is so sweet. I attend a caregiver support group and feel guilty because my wife doesn't have the fits of temper, rage, or depression that others deal with. I felt guilty for being tired when others had it much harder. Over time, my wife improved and became almost like her old self again. She never lost her love for either of us. It hurts that she blames herself for how our daughter treated her. Maybe I shouldn't have let my daughter focus so much on prestige and appearance. Maybe I should have recognized the signs early on and exposed her to different perspectives. Currently, my daughter and I aren't speaking. My wife just wanted a happy family. I'm now looking for therapy for us as a family. How do you like these stories? Write your opinion in the comments. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Love you.